Chapter 1. The Roadside Diner. The sky was set ablaze as the sun began to drop. That eerie middle ground when day turns into night, yet somehow the lesser of the two, had always been his favorite. Benji rested his chin on his shoulder as he leaned against the windowsill adjacent to his booth. His thoughts began to wander. The restaurant he sat in, located along the side of the highway known as Route 66, contained a plethora of Native American paintings and etchings adorned along the walls of the dining hall. Seated there, he watched the sky fade to black, his own reflection in the smudged glass window slowly gaining opacity against the backdrop of the Arizona landscape. The lights within the diner grew brighter in the contrast of the encroaching nightfall, until finally the sun disappeared completely behind the western rock formations across the desert plain. How the hell is this place staying in business? He thought to himself, smirking slightly at the thought. It was, after all, nearly empty tonight, as it was pretty much every time he made the 40-minute drive out to the rustic structure. Not even a gas station had preceded the lonely old restaurant, which itself could initially pass for just another mirage along the dunes, both in the suddenness of its appearance, along with the solitary nature in which it stood against such a seemingly inhospitable location. Had it been that long since he had first discovered the tired and beaten down diner all those years ago? Well, not that long ago. He was only 22 after all. Yet it seemed like nearly a lifetime. He reflected on that night. For the life of him, he couldn't recall what the fight was about. Only that he had decided enough was enough, and he would leave that town forever. He remembered storming from the house, the sound of the screen door crashing noisily behind him. Pushing 60 on a half tank of gas down the endless black strip of tarmac. Destination? Anywhere but there. He would leave that awful place and never, ever go back. Then he saw it, blinking in and out of existence against the vacant stretch of sand and rocks, black night sky and twinkling stars. The name Sally's seemed to beacon him like big pink balloon letters reflecting across the windshield. He remembered the only thing that he felt stronger than the hatred towards his stepfather that night was the hunger in his belly. He had spent the $20 he had taken from his mother's saving jar on what were possibly the best pancakes he had ever eaten. That was so long ago, he thought, reaching for his wallet. The driver's license in the first slot read Benjamin Harbour, a name he never really felt any connection with. Not that he preferred any other, it just seemed like it never really characterized him. The nickname Benji felt more suitable in his opinion. His parents had called him that, and his friends did too. It wasn't long before the name Benjamin was only associated with his mother being pissed at him for something. After all, mothers were like that. She couldn't very well use the tried and true, "you wait until your father gets home" technique. Not after the accident anyway. No, Benjamin would have to do. Benji pulled the debit card from the second slot in his wallet. He placed it on the tab tray and scribbled his name on the receipt. "This is what I get for trying new things," he grumbled to himself, wishing he had gone with his usual breakfast platter combo order, instead of being what he referred to as adventurous, and trying the spinach omelette. It wasn't terrible, he thought to himself, but still he wished he had gone with something else. Despite being so close to Las Vegas, Benji never considered himself much of a gambler. When it came to his meals, the ones he could afford at least, he liked to stick with what he knew. After all, why pay money for something you may not even like? This was the thought that always contested him when he tried to reach outside his usual routine. Then again, he would often think, how do you know you won't like something if you never try it? The two sides often made compelling arguments. This time, Benji had won out against himself. Or lost, depending on how you looked at it. Can't win 'em all, he mumbled under his breath to no one in particular, placing the red pen back into the tab tray and sliding it over to the edge of the table. Around here, the gesture served as a signal for, you can pick up the check now. He imagined it meant that pretty much everywhere. Across the diner, the bored waitress snapped to life. Like a buzzard on a wire, another common sight along the Arizona highways, the waitress had been waiting for Benji to finish filling out the check. Seeing as how things were dead slow, aside from himself, a middle-aged couple near the rear entrance, and a single elderly man occupying a booth near the bar, the waitress was eager to serve the remaining customers and clock out for the night. And, of course, there was Tom, the bartender. 15 or perhaps more years the waitress's senior, Tom was the lifeblood of the establishment. He wore an old-timey bartender garb right down to a little red bow tie. Red and white striped long-sleeved shirt under a stained white apron. The thick handlebar mustache above his mouth made him seem more like the kind of guy who'd give you a haircut in the 40s than a purveyor of alcohol. The long nights when solitary holdouts would push onto last call would be spent socializing over the closing work, over the sound of setting chairs on tabletops and clinging glasses being stacked for the night's storage would be the conversations regarding home life and sports results. Talk of how's the family and so who won tonight, as the last of the drunkies paid their tabs and illegally started their engines. This wasn't the kind of place where the cops were tipped off. It was a simple eatery of the beaten trail. A place where anyone could come from anywhere to exist, here and only here. If just for a little while, before returning to the cities from which they hailed, ready to pick up the rat race just where they'd left it. "Can I take this from you, sir?" the waitress asked. Benji looked up at her. "Yes," he said. "Thank you," he added, as she turned towards the waitress's station. Jillian, the name tag had read. She must be new, Benji thought, wondering what had happened to Helga, the waitress who had served him many times before. Maybe she finally won the lottery, he thought, remembering all the times Helga brought it up. "Kid," he remembered she would say, "if you come back and I'm not here, it means my numbers came up and you won't ever see my wrinkly ass again." It was their thing, or possibly Helga's thing, with everyone. Out here, there was little competition. If you were good at your job and didn't have a problem with showing up when you were supposed to, nobody really complained much about the service. That was something Benji thought he would miss as the country proceeded the way it was heading. Everyone was so careful these days. It seemed like anyone could be offended by anything lately. That's what he liked about Helga. Helga didn't give a shit. As he waited for his receipt, Benji felt a familiar rumbling in his lower abdomen. Uh-oh, he thought. And for the unpleasant part of roadside diner food. He slid out from the booth and lurked towards the restrooms near the back of the diner. He passed by the remaining booths, which sat empty and still, save for the old man, sitting near catatonic in the booth near the bar. The geezer had truly seen better days, those of which were undoubtedly an untold number of years behind him now. He stared vacantly from glassy eyes, set deep in wrinkled leathery sockets, not turning his head as Benji passed, but instead appeared to be transfixed by something placed straight in front of him opposite to the table he was occupying. Stranger still was that the man sat swaddled in a faded red fabric, some kind of blanket or thick sheet. It covered his body so that he closely resembled a burrito, with his grey hair poking out at one end. Though Benji was in a hurry to reach the restroom, he took notice of this man as he went by. He was grateful the old man did not turn to track him with his eyes, as he often noticed the elderly were keen to do in his experience. He had always felt unnerved by the looks he would receive from older people, as if, given the option, they might be so inclined to suck out his youth simply by staring at him. Then again, Benji figured it could just as easily be all in his head. In what would be tastefully described as a photo finish by Benji himself, his bathroom antics were concluded, and his exit from the stall was greeted with a rather unusual sight. Above the sink in the dimly lit restroom was a piece of blank printer paper attached to the mirror hanging on the wall. The paper was held against the mirror with a single strip of Scotch tape, and on the paper was a note written in red ink. The note appeared to be hastily scribbled, so much so that Benji had trouble reading it. After a moment, he deciphered the following. I'm not yet sure what has happened. Every time I try to leave this diner, I end up right back inside. I'm leaving this note as a proof to myself, proof that I can't possibly be returning to the same place. It's hard to imagine even writing this. I know how moving around works, one foot in front of the other. So why the hell am I not going anywhere? Alright, Benji thought, thinking someone at some point had a little too much to drink. You're no Hemingway guy, he thought cynically as he finished washing up his hands and exited the bathroom. He thought briefly to let the staff know about the note in the bathroom, but it was just a piece of paper, taped on top of that. He figured most graffiti artists at least had the balls to write their tags with a Sharpie. What kind of statement were these people going to make with something to be removed so easily as a piece of paper taped to a mirror? Besides, if he made mention of it, either the waitress would have to enter the man's bathroom, or the bartender would have to relinquish his post, long enough to possibly miss out on the old man in the booth, who could surely use a drink about now. Say, the old man. Where was he anyway? On entering the bathroom, Benji had sworn the old man in the booth was sitting there, near catatonic, wrapped in what looked like a red blanket, staring off into space. Why anyone would drive all the way out here to simply sit in the diner wrapped in a red blanket, he didn't know. Must have been an old person thing. Benji shuddered. The thought of becoming an old person, hell, old people in general, kind of freaked him out. After all, who wants to live forever? Benji laughed away the notion of everything he had thought of in the diner. He laughed at the idea of growing old. After all, he was younger than the other guests, younger than the waitstaff, perhaps the youngest individual to ever enter Sally's diner. Furthermore, it was okay if he felt like a screw-up. He had until he was at least the age of the waitress, who couldn't have been older than 33 or 35, before he would feel like his life had passed him by. With this thought in his mind, Benji turned the doorknob to the diner's back exit and pushed open the door, beginning a cyclical nightmare that would haunt him for the rest of his days.